What stands out to me about this entire California structural problem, you've got 11,000 homes that are gone. That's like an early estimate. Right now, it's estimated to be between 135 and 150 billion dollars worth of damage. 4% of GDP. There's an automatic assessment of like broad. Then when you get into the humanity of it, these are like families, these are people that are experiencing catastrophic loss that require them to commit to like a long journey of recovery and like rebuilding. And again, I think what we're really trying to talk about is like, what's the vision from here directly about a problem like this? Because if you don't have vision through this, if you're too zoomed in on reaction, you're going to miss the ability to rebuild in a way that prevents another catastrophic loss.
Because you're just going to do the same thing.
You just repeat. What's up, and welcome back to the Get Out of Your Own Way show. We're excited to talk today. We, probably like you, have to talk about California. And, you know, I think in a way, we've got to ask some questions about what the vision is for California. We know there's wildfires. We know there's a whole lot going on. It's a really difficult time there. And also it's a really important time to start asking some serious questions. Like, you've probably seen the news. The news is ablaze with all of this, pun intended. And I'm not trying to poke fun at it, but you know, we just got to talk about it real. What are you noticing when you hear all these news stories? What's the trend line that you're seeing?
And do you mean beyond like the people who are suffering and losing everything they own?
Well, if that's the trend line, that's the trend line.
Thankfully, that is still a big part of the story. There's a lot of noise that gets around any of these events. But that is still, maybe we're moving away from it because of fires. There's more control of the fires at the moment, although they're still burning. And so it's not as intense as it was several days ago. So there is that line, because I think it's up to like 10 people dead. I forget how many homes have been destroyed.
The data I have says 85 people.
Oh, 85.
And 11,000 homes.
Yeah. So you can never take that off the table. Like, that is the reality of what has happened.
Yeah. You may need to jump out or pull it closer. You know, I think there's obvious trend lines of loss and consequence and all this. There's also all these discussions about like conspiracy theories and
yes, everything.
There's also,
thanks to the internet.
Thank you, internet. There's also a ton of documentation about, you know, humans sort of accelerating some of this, like people, you know, arson, and, you know, there's a lot of conversation. And I don't want us to downplay the significance for those like directly impacted. It's an incredibly significant event. Our conversation today, though, is not about the impact. I think there is a degree of conversation that's needed around that. I actually want to take this a different direction. I think the question is like, what's next? What's ahead? What do we do? And we can look at this as an example of challenge or grief. You can make it about California. You can make it about a business. You can make it about a family. You can make it about any piece. But the question largely is like, what do we do from here? After we're done resolving the immediacy of the problem, I think this is where a lot of bottlenecks happen is, you know, how do we like actually respond to this? You've got the reaction part. I put this out.
We do really well.
Reaction is easy. Or maybe reaction is simple, but you know, to build a full response is a totally different responsibility.
Yeah. I'm thinking it's not that we don't even have examples of other, there's this type of natural disaster, but we've been through hurricanes. We've been through other forms of natural disasters where communities, where states have had to rebuild in many, not necessarily in the same way. Thankfully, we tend to learn the lesson. So it's not like we don't have we have plenty of examples of other communities doing it.
Yes, the reaction part.
And what do you do next? Because Florida is a great example because they've had hurricanes that decimate, or New Orleans, right, decimate the whole community.
Yeah.
And what do you do to rebuild while building it in a different way where it's protected?
Yeah.
And it's never tested until there's a test.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, what stands out to me about this entire California structure structural problem. You've got 11,000 homes that are gone. That's like an early estimate. Right now, it's estimated to be between 135 and 150 billion dollars worth of damage. I really don't know how they got that number, where they pulled it from. Maybe it's easy, maybe it's not.
It's like, well, they do that with the hurricanes though too. It's like, how'd you get that number overnight?
Fast, right? Like,
right.
Are you calculating for someone's Game Boy Pocket? It's like in an eBay case. Well, like they're like,
get my typewriter out.
Their gold foil Charizard that they kept in their drawer. I don't know. But when you think about these numbers, and they're thrown out pretty fast, 4% of GDP, there's an automatic assessment of like broad, right? Then when you get into the humanity of it, these are like families, these are people that are experiencing catastrophic loss that require them to commit to like a long journey of recovery and like rebuilding. And again, I think what we're really trying to talk about is like, what's the vision from here directly about a problem like this? Because if you don't have vision through this, if you're too zoomed in on reaction, you're going to miss the ability to rebuild in a way that prevents another catastrophic loss.
Because you're just going to do the same thing.
You just repeat. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it. If I were to go to the emergency room with a heart attack, I would hope the first question they wouldn't say is, well, how'd you let this happen? Why did you, that's, you first have to stop the bleeding before you could even begin to ask those questions.
That's fair.
And I think that's the piece that we like to jump, and it's easy for us to jump ahead because we're not there.
Sure.
We're not in the midst of, we're not at ground zero for that event.
And it is very confusing when you're not there.
Correct.
Like, I have been asking, how does this happen? Like, that house right there next to me was on fire. How does it get from there to here? I can't wrap my mind around that. And it makes it more complicated to try to put myself in the shoes of like maybe the macro. It really doesn't matter.
But even though I know that there were hurricane force winds, it's still hard for me to imagine that because I have never lived through that experience.
Yeah. It's very difficult to tie into it. The last big damage was Hurricane Helene. There was $225 to $250 billion in damage.
That was in North Carolina.
Yeah. Southeastern.
Yeah. Georgia, I think, as well.
Yeah. So we're talking about another $100 billion worth of damage, and that was massive. But what I find interesting about the conversation, right? Because the conversation, there is a demand for immediacy. Like, you got to solve some of these problems.
Again, you have to stop the bleeding.
You got to stop the bleeding.
But it's not only the bleeding of the person who lost their property. There's the bleeding of what's wrong with the system.
Well, and you can't even assess that and do anything until it's band-aided, right? Until like the fire's out, I suppose. Well, these situations.
Yeah, because you gotta work on the immediate.
Yeah, it's fucking fire. You got to put it out, and that's true in business, right? Put the fire out.
Correct.
And once the fire is out, you have to start asking different questions.
Right. In business, we become addicted to the fire, though. That we do find that.
Yes, I'd say CEOs are usually firefighters.
Yeah,
by nature. If you're solving the problem with immediacy, though, you are naturally going to set yourself up for a repeat.
Absolutely.
And so that's why this conversation of like, hey, California, like, what is the vision here? Because if you really look at solving the problem and you just say rebuild it, this is going to happen again.
Correct.
It might not be for 20 years.
Correct. It might not be for 50.
It might not be for 50 years. But we've heard stories like this. You and I both, having a history in Maryland. There was 100-year flood, and then 4 years later there was another 100-year flood.
Right. Yeah, there were two of them.
Continues to rebuild the same way.
Correct.
Right. So whenever the next 4-year flood pops up, because it's clearly not a 100-year flood, you're back in the same cycle. And I think what damages people the most is
well, can I just one say, because I think as Americans in particular, we have this mindset that we're going to beat it. Like, it's not going to happen again. We're going to come back stronger, which is good to some extent. But if you're not learning the lesson that it is teaching you about that experience, you will get swallowed up by the problem again.
Well, that was what I was going to say, is that what destroys people the most is not hardship recovery. It's hardship recovery loss.
Correct.
Like, you're not out and you just get hit again.
Yes.
Right. There's a ton of data around like millennials and home buying, and how millennials were like the first generation or a generation, I suppose, to experience two major financial crises within like the 10-year span, that most of them would be at a mature enough age to buy a home. And so like both of these events sort of created this like, okay, I got through one and then I'm right back down. That's the hope killer, right? If you have some experience like this, 11,000 homes, and you're one of those homes and you rebuild your home and then 3, 5, 7 years later, it happens again. That's what destroys the human spirit of, I can get out of this. I'm going to recover. You know, it destroys vision because your momentum is lost again. And, you know, I think there are a ton of different anecdotes to this. We could probably say that this happens with athletes and injuries. It probably happens with mothers that are expecting and then have some sort of like miscarriage or loss. It probably happens in business when entrepreneurs lose their business or things go under and they rebuild again and it dies again. Like, I don't think it's the first blow that kills the human spirit, the hope. I have felt, and I have been through plenty of human spirit tests, it is usually the second blow that hurts the most.
Yeah, how would I say it? I think that's true. I think we just tend, in my experience, to enter into that second one more cautiously. I don't know if we ever lose that. I don't think we ever really fully lose that. I think we just become more cautious because we've been burned.
Help me understand. Lose what?
The spirit.
We don't lose the spirit.
I don't think it ever fully like goes away.
I mean, I know plenty of people who have never recovered, who have lost their spirit. You and I both know people like that who have never climbed back up again. Where what they have lost is hope. What they've lost is like the fire inside them to say, I'm gonna work for this. I'm gonna get out of this. There's almost like a solemn surrender to like, this is my circumstance.
Oh yeah, this is the way life is.
And that's where you get broken souls, right? That's where you meet someone and you're like, you kind of feel for their,
but at that point you're just waiting for death.
Yeah. You give up, you quit.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not suggesting that we be, like non-sympathetic to what's happened. I actually think that this is sympathy, right? So here's my position. And this, if there was a love letter to California that I could write right now, it's this. You've got your team in position. You're navigating the hardship as best you can. You're trying to figure out immediate short-term solutions to stop the bleeding. My opinion is that the best thing that you can do and the most responsible thing you can do is bring someone from out of the problem to work on the problem.
Absolutely.
Because if you are in it,
yes,
you're going to solve it for like now.
Correct.
And you're only going to band-aid the situation rather than thinking so perspectived.
Yes.
That you start to imagine new solutions to this.
Yeah. And whether you like it or not, you just can't see that far. You can't always, there are always blind spots.
Yeah. Having outsiders, having people from other countries, like there have to be other countries that have dealt with this kind of calamity. Obviously we have such a strong economy that we can produce and maybe consider other options. But again, my hope is that California is really wise, that governors, mayors, that city elected officials, that entrepreneurs, that outside companies like I know Airbnb and Uber have made some efforts to like support people, but that there's some sort of collective board that's created from external, non-California, non-affected individuals that aren't tethered to it, not from a lens of apathy, but from a lens of intelligence and vision to say, we've got to have a different solution than proposed reordering of the same thing and sequence we've done.
Yeah. What do they call it? Rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. It's still going to be the Titanic.
I've never heard that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah. You need a bigger vision, right? California needs a bigger vision right now. And I think communicating that is also important in this. Probably not yet, but I do think we're not far away from the conversation being and demanding that, like, it's going to make a lot of people upset. And what I'm about to say is going to make a lot of people upset. You need someone to come in and talk about what the future of this solution looks like in a completely untethered way to today. Like that in some ways is disconnected from the day-to-day, like family by family. Like this has to be a macro solution.
Yes.
And if you get into like the weeds of, this home or one home or this block or this community or these like high net worth families that lost their mega house and insurance, like then you starts to cloud your vision for here's a long-term solution. Because once you have a long-term solution,
then it's more about fixing a problem.
Then you're just band-aiding, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Once you have that vision, then you backtrack to the individual family. But it has to tether, right? I mean, this is our whole theory about business, life, personal, all of it. If you have big vision, it creates the criteria that you address today. And then those building blocks, one, have a stacking effect, really important. But also, when you're communicating this, there is nothing more commanding of confidence than vision. I believe that to the core. When someone steps up and says, hey, I've got a vision for this, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to like it. He might seem apathetic and like unemotional. But if he can say, this is where we're going to go on this, this is what we're going to do to not address problem next, but like in mass, where we can get better at this holistically, people are going to be able to get behind something. And again, people are going to like resist it. Some people might not even like that I said that, but it's really important.
And some people will just move on and go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Why should I keep putting myself back in this situation?
Yeah. Well, California's had that issue anyway, right? There's been a mass exodus for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
This probably does not help, right? When 4% of GDP allegedly is like up in smoke, you probably have an issue anyway, on top of the other issues that have been plaguing individual residents, taxes and real estate.
LA, I think, is one of the largest economies in the world. If I'm not mistaken. That county.
So. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty nuts. I also think that, if we're saying,
I would never want to live there.
Oh, it's personally there.
I wouldn't want to live there though.
The conditions
and driving
and conditions, great. Environment, great. Some of the strings attached to that require a lot of discernment.
Yeah.
But if we're saying like, hey, California, like what's the vision? It automatically separates two schools of thought. And again, if we're using this as an example, businesses have a fire, right? They have a problem. They have, maybe a staffing issue. Maybe they have a capacity issue. And then if you just solve and walk away, you don't have vision, you end up back where we are. So it's the same thing for you. If you're listening and you have a business and you're dealing with problems and fires and you're the fireman have this predisposition to like help immediately, right? Bleeding hearts, like I'm going to go rescue and do what I can. And you need that. You have to have that boots on the ground effect.
They're good for that immediate.
Yeah. It's so great and important.
I saw that with like World Kitchen is great for going to those areas that immediately in LA to do meals.
Yeah. They're just like,
they're there. Yeah.
And there's a lot of response teams.
Red Cross, all
that
of them
are so good at that.
Yeah. They're trained to.
The amount of logistics and infrastructure to do that's amazing. It's so impressive.
Yeah. To be able to drop everything and go where there's
but the other part of this that I think ties into vision, again, if you're the firefighter in your business and you probably understand this, like when you're on the ground.
And if you don't know you are.
You probably are.
We'll get you in touch with you.
Yeah. Let's talk, you and I. If you're the firefighter in your business, you're probably accustomed to like, okay, just go, deploy. There is such an importance in perspective and patience in this kind of position that the heart in everyone really doesn't calculate. So if everyone is rushing to the room where it's on fire, someone has to stay back and keep perspective. Right.
Yeah. It works that way in the military. Who's the person, the general?
Don't send the generals, right? Don't send the generals.
Yep.
And I just feel like, we as like, especially proliferated by social media, we as an individual here in this country are so aggressive and so loud on social about like what should be done.
Correct.
And
Now, don't ask me to do anything about it, but I'm going to tell you what should be done.
And the things that we can do are typically like person to person.
From all of us who don't even live there.
Right. Right. Yeah. Let's send extra tires. Like, we don't need tires. Like, what are you doing? Right. It's almost insensitive and arrogant. The people on the ground that need help, certainly have an important duty to like speak up for what they need, to ask for help. And we as other members of this culture have a responsibility to like do what we can. Right. But I think this is a really important comment too. For those of us that it doesn't directly impact, it's arrogant to be like, you know what you should do?
Right. Or tell you what you need.
Yeah. Like, and yet we need perspective to be able to solve this kind of problem. How do you think about?
Well, because this is, and I wrote about it on my own social media this week. I think in these moments, we have a tendency to feel so helpless that's what makes us react to the situation, because I can't handle the anxiety of something like that happening. And so I immediately react because I feel helpless.
So what's the difference between staying out of like a healthy compassion and building vision and staying out for a long-term strategy?
One is more passive. The other is more active, I would say. The one building a vision, I think, is more active. It doesn't always feel active, but it's more active.
Yeah. Strategic.
Yes. Yeah. That might be the better way of putting it.
Yeah. Yeah. Vision for a state going through this kind of turmoil is not only going to be important to the recovery of this economic hardship, it's also going to be important to the humanity of this experience, right?
And I think it's important to always that the humanity has to be there. You have to keep the humanity within the context of what's going on.
Yeah. You know, the older I get, the more I work on vision, where we're working on, companies with 50, 100, 200, 500 people, the more I respect individuals who have to report on very complex and often challenging situations. And like, when I say report, I mean like literally on the news, in front of a podium, talking about it. And do we attack these people.
Right.
God, they get scolded so hard.
We try to simplify what are very complex problems.
Totally. And again, their job is to remain somewhat objective and like report information and report, now
data
and vision.
Yes.
Here's what we're working on.
While trying to keep the emotional piece out of it.
Try to keep the emotional piece, have humanity.
Yes.
And also at the same time,
right.
You've got to somehow relay that you don't have an answer yet.
Correct. And it's okay.
In a way that's confident though.
Yes.
Because otherwise people are like, well, you don't have a clue.
Right. Yeah. Just fire them.
There's a rush into this.
But again, I think that's this reaction piece, because we don't know what to do. So we react.
Rush. Yeah. To me, the toggle.
Bring order back to the chaos.
Separate it out. You've got now and you've got vision. And those are two different functions. Report on vision, report on now, but those have to be distinct. And I think it's true in business. I think it's really critical for leaders to be able to report on now, especially in challenge or problems, and report on vision. If you only do one or the other, I think that's when leadership gets questioned. If you only report on vision, now gets ignored. Now,
yes, people
listening are dissuaded from like, hey, you understand that this is real? I remember there was a story a long time ago of a CEO who thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to level the playing field. Everyone gets the same salary. I think he made the salary in the business like 70 grand. Everybody. Right.
Yeah. I kind of remember that.
And so the whole piece was like, I think this would actually be a better economy. Right. And fantastic social experiment. But his vision was essentially the social experiment.
Yeah.
in saying that, it naturally called a lot of, it created so much chaos. And the more I read about it, the more digging I did about it at the time, because at the time I was running a financial education company. Learning about it created all this tension, but it collapsed the business. It punished hard work. It punished,
why should I work any harder?
creativity.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
punished, it broke a fundamental human condition, which is more is better, right? Because if the person above me managing me makes the same as me, why would I work? Why would I work for that?
Correct.
If the person above me managing me is like, that person's making the same as me, why would I manage them? Like, it's the same. It fundamentally failed.
All he did was test a philosophy.
He did. And stress test it did.
Yep.
Stress test it failed.
Yeah.
But that, like, the
Because
reporting on
it's
that,
taken the humanity out of it. Like,
Sure.
you throw humans into it, that will not work.
yeah. And I think this is sort of a concept that happens in conversations about socialism and funded programs.
Correct.
It's like,
Correct. Yeah.
when you disincentivize,
All people are created equal. Okay. Yes.
that would be great.
Right.
That would be awesome.
Right.
Right.
That is a lifelong process.
It breaks down in athletics too.
Correct.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
It breaks down everywhere.
Yeah.
But the reporting on the now was really interesting. So there was a constant conversation around what's happening, how is this collapsing, what's going on, and most of that was funded by the individuals because they were up in arms about it. Like, it created a lot of dramatic conversations. And it was really interesting to watch, because the thing that died fastest was vision. It destroyed the vision, but there wasn't a report on both, right? There was never like a return to vision. It was like an experiment about a vision. And then as soon as it like didn't work, vision died. And I think that's kind of what happens.
Was it ever a vision to begin with?
What's that?
Was it ever really a vision to begin? It was an experiment.
No, it was a vision. I mean, what is a vision if not an experiment? Like, how would you define the difference?
A situation like that, I don't know. I would have a hard time seeing that as a vision, because it's very, you could essentially accomplish that in weeks by changing everyone's salary to a specific thing. How it flushes out might take time as to how humans react to that situation.
Well,
but changing a number is easy.
Yeah, but the number was representative of what he wanted. The vision was sort of this
utopia.
I don't think it was utopia, but I think it was sort of an equanimity in all of this, and an equality, a camaraderie, and like, we're all on the same boat.
Yeah.
So that the tactic was level salaries. Maybe the tactic was misplaced, but like, conceptually, that was probably a vision. I don't know. I didn't.
Yeah.
It's not like I had to talk to him.
I would say it's a misunderstanding of humans.
Yeah, the psychology doesn't
right.
Much out.
From a faith base, there's that level of, we're all the same in that way. But you throw in the human condition, and that changes the dynamic of all of it.
Yes. Well, also, it was a microcosm. It was like, well,
right.
You're trying that in a company, but someone could go, they just had their salary reduced from 120 grand to 70 grand,
right.
and they can leave and get back to 120.
What's the incentive for that person?
Yeah. Well, the collective, right? The collective. So there was no I don't think there was a vision that really made sense to the individuals, nor were they included in the process, right? So there was a disconnect between the now and the vision. And there have been hundreds and hundreds of like human events that have been only one or the other. There's a now, no vision. The thing in Maryland, same example, right? Giant storm, stores collapse. Like, when you go there now, there's bridges where there used to be buildings. There's holes in the ground 30 feet deep that are ravines that used to be a building. I used to go to the bar on the corner called the Phoenix Emporium. It's now a hole. So the now happens. If you don't have vision, I think it's very difficult to like navigate a now where you're not actually sure of going backwards or forwards.
Yeah, I wrote down here, because I think vision would be somewhat equatable to creation. You're creating something, but creation needs order and chaos. Both are necessary in the process. In the case where what California's been experiencing, it's been all chaos, which is why we try to react and put order back to that. But somehow you have to allow those two things to continue to create tension with one another in order to create something new.
Yeah, I think that's true with now and vision, right?
Yeah. It's just different language. Yeah.
Yeah. Good old now and laters. My least favorite candy as a kid.
That was a candy?
You never had a now and later?
I don't think so.
Bro, what?
What kind of candy was it?
It's like taffy in little squares. Man, I can't believe you never had a now and later.
That you could break teeth on? Well, you're
like soft.
You're much older than I am.
I'm not 100. You probably lived through the invention of taffy.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, I'd be curious. Hold on, I'm going to Google this.
When taffy was created?
When was taffy invented?
I can almost guarantee it was an accident. Someone was trying to make something else, and taffy was created.
Yeah. That's true with a lot of things. The history of saltwater taffy. Oh, it's about as old as you. Born in the 1800s.
If I was born in the 1800s, I wouldn't be sitting here at the moment.
Oh, you just aged well.
What was the movie? Benjamin Button.
You're Benjamin Button. Early 1800s. Taffy was first used. Yeah. I'm not reading this whole article, but my ADD was like, yeah, let's go. Okay. So back to this California piece. I want to discuss this with you, and you know, if you're listening, like, please share your thoughts. Like, reach out to me on Instagram. Tell me what you think about what we're talking about and how it connects to vision. Again, there's an empathy to like the individual, the family. I want to go that way for a moment. As an individual, if you go through this kind of experience, you have a tremendous amount of grief, right? Grief is a very complex emotion. It's got tethers of anger and hurt and pain,
denial,
bargaining,
depression, acceptance.
So those are all the phases, but that's different.
And you're bouncing through them,
right? But those are what I mean is that like those are the phases of it, but inside of it is like, well, I feel good today. I feel bad tomorrow. I'm sad. I'm angry. I'm upset. Like you're all over the place.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm happy to be alive.
You're bouncing around. Weird. Yeah.
So like the emotional wheel, you were just spinning.
Yes.
Like roulette. I think that the only way for someone to navigate a hardship like that, especially with such a large fiscal catastrophe underneath them, potentially, I mean, well, whether or not they get their money back or whatever, they still lost their things. Things are identity in many of us.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only way out is vision. The only way truly to navigate grief is to say, I can imagine a future beyond this moment. Otherwise, the obstacle becomes so inanimmately immovable that it's very difficult to see hope, right? Interestingly, I think the kids are better than this than adults.
Oh, yeah, they're much more resilient.
They're not tethered to the loss. They're designed like to think about next because there's not as much behind them to say like, well, this is the end or make stories up. But as an adult, you know, if you're going through this is a great time to sit down and think about your vision. While that's very difficult, I do think it's a solution. It's a practical, tactical solution. Not like vision, like make a vision board of your like abs.
Right.
What I mean is, what does this look like on the other side? You have a home again. You have recovered financially. You have maintained your relationships. You've learned some personal lessons. You've regathered and rebuilt an identity, like fundamental pieces of the human experience that are only palatable through the lens of vision.
I think it's a delicate balance because there has to be a moment where the person can finally begin to accept that this is what happened. This is where I'm at. And we know that from working with people as well. I've worked with lots of people in loss and grief, and it's knowing the time. Even if I have to be the person, you have to be the person who holds that vision, that bigger piece. There has to be someone at least, because that the bleeding hasn't stopped for that person yet.
Sure.
that the bleeding has to stop before they could even begin to envision that there is something beyond.
So you're saying they need an outside person?
Oftentimes, yeah, which is what I did working with people in ministry.
Yeah,
I was that
yeah.
person who you hold that vision of there's something beyond this.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that when you're the person in that.
To do it alone.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why, I mean, this is what we do. Also, what a lot of people do. So I agree on that point. And does that dismiss the argument that vision is the thing that will get them over it?
No, I just don't think that person can always hold that at that point. Someone else has to hold it with them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do think there's levels to it as well. If you've lost a family member in that,
totally,
that's going to be very different than, I don't want to say but just losing property is a very different type of loss.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's incredibly complicated. And again, it's very difficult to even comment on because there's a lot of really gnarly emotion. There's a lot of reality to this. It's difficult for people to swallow individually, right? Not just in macro, but like a thing, and this comes to mind, a thing that bothers me about data like this is that we get so accustomed to macro numbers. Like I feel this is like as a business owner, we get so accustomed to like big numbers. So in business, right, you're talking hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. You look at the data for here, you're talking about 4% of GDP is billions of dollars. Like the frequency of zeros after that is a lot. And then you go, oh, what's just
I would have to
people?
like sit down and write it and figure out how many zeros I have to add.
And then you look at the numbers and you're like, oh, it's just 85 people. Compared to 135 billion. Right. Well, that's a tiny fragment number. Oh, it's just 11,000 homes. Like, well.
But it wasn't, it was not your home.
It wasn't your home. Yeah. This is where, I think numbers can really dissuade us from like assessment and vision, right? But if someone is
I wouldn't want to be the person that get up and says it's only 85 people. That person would be out of a job.
Yeah. There's no way to relay.
You're not a good PR person at that point.
No. The argument though still is like, regardless of your loss, and this is tough love here, regardless of your loss, there's a process to this, right? I'm not saying it happens tomorrow, but beyond the problem solving piece of it and beyond the initial grief components, I think it's critical to begin to think longer than the immediate problem in big spans, 3 years, 5 years. If nothing else, to give you a little glimmer and light to say there's something beyond this, like you said. If I look back, like I had a friend murdered on Valentine's Day in, I don't even know what year it was. I was probably 22, like 23. One of my closest friends in high school, if not my closest friend in high school. Played soccer together on the same team, laughed, hung out, like the whole deal. And I hung out with him through college. I hung out with him, let's see, it would have been beyond college, maybe by a year or two. So probably 21, 22, 23. And that moment created a whole different version of me. It created a piece of me that had to confront mortality, had to confront this wild unknown. I remember his sister reached out to me and was like, do you know anyone? And like for weeks, we were in touch about like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea what happened here. He had eye surgery and was on the couch. Someone broke into his house to shout. And it was an open casting. It was like a weird thing. But that, in that moment, the only thing that I could really grasp onto, aside from like the pain of it and the observation of this loss, was there's a version of me that has reordered myself to think of him and me and life and business differently. And that made it easier to get through the like, what ifs? What if I had been there with him? Like, we used to hang out, like play Madden and NBA 2K or whatever it was at the time. Like, you think about this stuff. You like, your mind starts to warp in this spiral of like, what if I did something different? What if like what if we'd all been on vacation, right? Think about California. Like, what if I had like packed a car? What if I had an emergency bag? What if I had like gotten my kids out? What if I had like saved their bunny? You know, you just like,
But in that moment when she's calling you, once she's looking for answers, which is often the case.
Yes.
I think what I had to learn in my time in ministry was I had to walk into many uncomfortable situations and situations that I had no idea what I was walking into when I was going through a door. That I had to learn how not to react in those situations. I still think it comes back to that. We immediately want to react. You cannot react in those situations because you're taking away the opportunity for the uncomfortableness of the situation that exists for everyone in that situation.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this many times as well. That you got to be able to go into the unknown. There might not be an answer there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in some sense, right? What I love about what you just said is your definition of stability or concrete or permanent is now gone, right? It's evaporated. So you are in the unknown.
Yep.
And the only way to get back to the known is through the unknown. And that's largely true for everything. We are by nature, I think, as a human condition to think like, if that table is there today, it will be there tomorrow. That's just how we think, right? This is a funny thing about raising a little one is the phase where they go from object impermanence to object permanence.
Right.
So like with a toddler or a little tiny one,
I'm gone.
Like you take the cup away and the cup's gone.
Right.
There was no cup.
Yeah.
It's destroyed forever. But as soon as they learn object permanence, now if I take this away, now it's hiding, right? And they're like, it must have gone somewhere.
Now it becomes like a joke.
Yeah. And that psychological structure means that I'm doing the same with my house. I'm doing the same with my friendships. I'm doing the same with my relationships. Is largely why we don't change as much as we could. But now you're forced into change. And another argument for vision is that if you are forced into change and you do not know what you want in the long run, even vaguely, your level of optionality is so overwhelmingly massive that it's difficult to make choices. And I think that that's why I'm such a proponent of vision through hardship. And it's been my answer through hardship. Even losing a friend, I didn't know it was vision, but there was something that anchored me to say like, okay, I now have a lot of options. Do I go drink myself like a fifth and like crawl under a bed? Do I talk about it?
You may have to for the first week.
Yeah. But like beyond a week, right? Beyond 2 weeks, beyond 2 months, do I become an alcoholic if I continue to make that choice? Right. Yeah. There's like the now and then there's vision. And I get overloaded if I have too many options. It's easy. I think everyone does. And now you have an unlimited amount of options. Where do we go? Where do we live? What are we about? What my job? What kind of car? Like you have so many things that if you don't have something, even again, just loosely organized to say, this is what I'm working towards, I think it's very difficult to get out of the swirl. And then that spiral just goes. That's been my experience. For like the micro, the like individual critical. Also for the macro, like same for California as a state. If you consider too many options right now, it's going to be years before anything happens. And you don't have years.
The one guarantee is it will happen again.
Yeah.
Because we have no control over fire, hurricane. We have no control over that.
I feel like you should just recite the Captain Planet call. Wind, water, earth.
But we don't have control over that. It's going to happen again.
Heart. That's the last one.
I'll shut up now.
So there's a degree of like ego, right? Human sort of super status, right? Of like, no, we are in charge.
Yep.
And
okay,
these are, I mean, this is bigger than just the U.S. too. I mean, things like this happen all the time. Tsunamis hit Japan.
Correct.
Fires hit the Amazon. Earthquakes hit.
And humans are humans who think they're going to beat it.
Yeah. There is something that creates a smallness, in this. It does bring up really good things in humanity, but I also think it largely has been disappointing to see how we Band-Aid and then move on. As soon as this is Band-Aided,
But similar
stop talking.
to Maryland, well, it's not going to happen for another 100 years. So what? It doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's not going to affect.
You just move to the next thing.
Yes.
Like this, whenever this gets to a place of like stability, it won't be in the news anymore.
Correct.
And those 11,000
or another story comes along.
Yeah.
Trump gets inaugurated next week.
Yeah.
The story cycle will change.
It goes somewhere else.
Yep.
Which means attention goes somewhere else.
Yep.
Which means vision goes somewhere else.
Yep.
Right. Like there has to be a focus and an outside voice to be like, I'm going to own this. I'm going to work on this. And California, we're going to figure something out. We need time, or we need to think about solutions.
Correct. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, you can't think about the problem.
Well, think about how many times
that you have.
it's been Band-Aided already to get us to this point. That'll be part of the process of
That's the
evaluating.
macro.
Yes.
In macro.
Of what has transpired over years. All of that has to be dug up in some ways and evaluated.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure it's happening, beneath the
Yes.
the radar right
Yeah.
now, what people are talking about.
Well, and it happens on the internet.
Yeah. I just think that wildfire is an interesting metaphor for a lot of what individuals are experiencing in their life,
In the wilderness,
their friends, in their business.
fire is necessary.
Yes. Yeah, there's a great line in a Batman movie about wildfire. Like when the forest overgrows, fire sweeps in.
It has to.
Yeah, it's nature's law.
Yep.
Yeah, sort of something has to reset the system.
It gets re-envisioned.
Yeah.
Nature re-envisions itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we don't have control over a lot of that.
Well, it does force a lot of reflection on control for sure.
Yeah.
Especially for those influenced where they're like, there's nothing you could have done different. More than likely, there's nothing. If you got your family out, if you got, a couple key items out, if you're okay, the sun is going to shine again. And I hope that the people around you are doing what they can, right? That you have the support and that we're working on that. But dude, like, you ain't got we don't have very much control.
Nope.
Force is like really deep. Like you got to sit on that one.
Correct. Yeah. That we have a hard time with that. Because I think it's tied to the mortality question though too.
Yeah, dude. It's totally uncomfortable to realize that you have way little control.
Yes.
And only
over
personal hardship can show you that.
Control over your own life, let alone trying to control someone else's life.
Yeah. Oh man. There was I was thinking about this one day. I don't know why. The like mail got delivered to my house. And it just kicked off this whole thought and reflection.
Isn't that what usually happens?
It did, but never did I stop and think about like the mail getting delivered, right? I don't have control over what gets delivered. This is an interesting thing, right? You have no control over what gets delivered to you as an individual, like car accident. Dude, on the highway today, this guy must have been super drunk. I like ended up dodging, like, man, it was a very close call. And the only thing I could do in that situation was dodge and hope.
And maybe like 10 degrees. Like you don't even have to. If you do this,
the car next to me.
You're the
dodge.
one that will. Yeah.
Yeah. But like very little control. So the mail gets delivered, and
were you on the 101?
Yes. 202.
Yeah, it's just as bad.
So the mail gets delivered, and like whatever's in the mail, I got to deal with. Now I can like tuck it under the rug or like throw it away or whatever, but whatever's in the mail, I got to deal with. Now his job, what he's controlling is what gets delivered. He doesn't control the content, but he does control like that it gets delivered. And I was having this whole like
his one sole purpose.
That deliver. I had this whole like reflection on how interdependent I am on so many things and how.
Is this what you do while you're alone?
Yeah.
Think about the mailman.
Oh man, I just think about everything, dude. But I was thinking about how like
pondering how the mail works.
Pondering all of it. It doesn't make any sense how mail works. It's crazy. I put a letter in a box and it goes thousands of miles away. What it really made me think about was I'm interdependent. I'm dependent on a lot. And independence, right? This idea of like, I'm independent is a total farce.
Yes.
You can ask anybody that's going through this right now. Independent is a farce. And hold on, before you go, because I think this is important. Dependence.
Of course it is.
To be dependent is to let go of control. California needs to let go of control and like let other people in. When families lose their house, you have to let go of control and let other people help. You have to let other people support. You have to let other people in. You have to let other people know you got a problem and let go. And it's an interesting interplay to me to think about independence, which we all say we want, and interdependence, which is largely, I have way less control than I think, and you play a big role in that. I have to accept that you have a big role with that.
But now what I wanted to say was there's actually been a lot written out there about Western culture has leaned too far to the independent piece.
Agreed.
Facebook, stuff like that was supposed to bring that back. That was an original intent of a lot of those things to create an interdependence. Has only made it work.
Segregated, yeah.
Yes.
More and more. It's an echo chamber.
But it really, even when we talk about community and stuff like that, how do we maneuver that? You're essentially fighting where culture has moved us to this ultra independence piece.
Yeah.
How do you bring that back to recognize where I think you have to go? Maybe it doesn't have to be as drastic as a fire, something like this. I really think you have to face some kind of difficulty in your life before you recognize you actually need other people.
Yeah, the value of it.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely have devalued community. And, even as I think about what community has become, most communities now are organized by economics. And I don't mean like neighborhoods. I mean, the idea of community is a monetizable thing.
And because it's not really a community, it's a group of individuals that call themselves a community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you pay in,
correct,
now you're part of the community.
Yes.
And that's wide. We're tribal creatures, man. Like the social psychology that's documented over millennia, and experiences like this show you that.
I've seen this on some Scottsdale pages. Pushback on homeowners association. Here's someone that is going to try to control
the community.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that.
Then it's not community.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. Like, we don't want people painting our house purple or your house purple.
Correct. Yeah.
But like, that's not.
Well, I don't want to live by someone who painted their house purple. All right.
Yeah. It's also like, posturing of power.
Yes. Yep.
Bro,
control.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that, I think California, what I feel about California is represented by my distance to it, right?
We'll be there in 2 months.
I've checked in with people, like, there's a lot going on there, but my distance to it also is what helps create conversation and helps create this idea of like, okay, what do you do if you can't prevent like wildfires,
forest fires,
Yogi? Only you can prevent forest. If you can prevent them, right? Like, truly cannot. If you know they're going to happen, what can you control? And maybe that's better policies for evacuation. Maybe that's better quarantine effects. Like, you got to start thinking
how you build, where you build, lots of those things.
Yeah, I don't know.
I understand. Like, this might be a great view. I'm right on the ocean, and I don't know the whole area. But is that always the best for the landscape of the area, or understanding how weather and environment works?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know either. Looking at some of the data,
but that property sells for a lot of money.
Yes, it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. I just really hope that someone comes along and says, "Hey, here's the vision. Here's where we're going." For a lot of reasons, California. It feels like this example is a bit more, I don't know why. Something about fire versus like water and wind, like a hurricane, it seems totally different. Because, and this is just my observation, in hurricane, most places that get hurricanes, everyone knows, right? Everyone's like, yeah, it's fucking coming. We gotta go.
Yeah.
It was like, no one's like, I don't know. Like, they're just like, get out.
Yeah.
Because we've been here before, right? Because hurricanes are cyclical. I don't know that a wildfire has hit this area to this extent.
Well,
So
especially
people did like, they just believed it.
well, like a year ago, they had more water than they knew what to do with.
That seemed to be false. You know, but when a hurricane hits, you know, we watch it on the news, it wrecks stuff, and there's a degree of sympathy, but I don't know. This is seemingly like it's catching a lot of people off guard that it could happen this way, or that fire works like this. Again, I don't fully understand, because I don't know how that house being on fire would get my house on fire. Even if there's crazy wind, like it's hard to wrap my mind around.
But you just see some of those images of the fires out there where it's like raining embers from fires.
I know.
So it very easily can travel.
And I can understand it here, right? Okay, like wind is blowing stuff around, and like I've camped enough to know
Right.
if
Right.
an ember falls out of a little fire pit, you better step on that thing like real fast.
Yeah.
You just, it goes like this. But I do think that this is observed very differently than a hurricane, because a hurricane has enough reputation. It has enough trust and like threat for people to be like, "Hey, fuck them." Nope.
Right.
Dude.
Right.
And I think in a way, you know, maybe a lesson learned and part of what's ahead for California is to really sit down and think about how do we respond differently and honor that this thing is strong.
I think we've talked about this before, but I think, and I'm going to go back to what I already said. I think until you face some type of hardship, it's very easy to believe it's not going to happen to me until it happens to you.
Can Arizona get fires?
Yeah, they've had plenty of them.
I'm buying 75 fire extinguishers right now.
Right. At least you have a hose hooked up.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that would save me, but you know what? Thinking about it too, I asked a buddy I was on a call with, like, what would you take from your house? You know, if you knew shit was going down and needs to leave, what would you take from your house? And I look around and I've got nice things. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for a good life. You know, there's things that are easy to replace. What's in kitchen, you know, stuff like can't replace art. That's a hard one. Can't replace people, obviously, like assuming that's already taken care of. You know, but both of us were kind of like, I don't know, like that question as a kid was thrown in front of me often. You know, what would you take it? What are the three most valuable things? Like, what would you take in a fire? And you're like, I'd take my buddy and I'd take, you know, my blanket. And,
Right.
But when you actually think about, if you respect it, right? You respected this thing could happen, and you're like, all right, I'm going to get out early. And you do have a little bit of time to stop and again, respect it with a bit of, ahead thinking. You have time to like really be strategic and think about your life and think about what matters. But I think if you're not in the storm, if you're not in the radius and you haven't really directly been impacted, it's probably wise to think about what if there was impending problem and I respected it and I knew it was coming, what would I do today to prepare for that? And I bet you if you really, really think about that question, whoever you are listening, you would make a change in your business. You would make a change in your personal life. You would make a change in your family system. You would probably say something to somebody that matters. Like if you actually think about what's going on, it won't happen to me. Everything's fine. And when situations like this happen, it forces you to be like, should I make some changes?
Right.
And if you don't, it's on you. Like, it's all good. Like, cool. But I would like to use this scenario in California, which I am not directly impacted by at the moment, to my knowledge, and say, what can I do different because of this example? And that's why I think California needs a vision, right? Also for other states who are like, well, hurricane, clean it up and get back to work. Can they actually set a standard for how we respond to big problems that affect thousands of people, make billions of dollars evaporate, and instead of just being passive and saying like, hey, you know, we're gonna let the dust settle and figure it out, somebody actually comes in from out of town, out of sight, really zoomed out and says, let's put some new policies in place. Let's put some new structure in place.
Yeah. I don't even know because I don't know it well enough. In fires, I would think there's also a period of time where you can't build there anyway. Like until
I'm sure it has to calm down.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like radioactive, but it still has a bunch of, I mean, when anything burns, it creates a whole upheaval of gases and toxins, and
especially in an urban area.
yeah, you're burning shit in the house, like
Yeah.
all kinds of plastics and
Yeah.
nuts.
Like hurricane, there is, again, I think we just know it well enough. There's a process that takes place where cleanup can begin. As soon as the storm leaves, you begin to clean up, do something.
Yeah.
It's different when it's fire.
Yeah, I would think so too. Yeah.
I have a container with like just important papers and photos and stuff. That would be the first thing I would grab.
Just
Anything
carry the
else?
fire starter out.
Anything else could be replaced.
Can be replaced. Yeah, if again, it forces reflection for all of us, I think, to really look at, again, what can I do different? What can this teach me without me being in it? There's a quote that I love.
We're not really people that have lots of stuff, though.
No,
we're not accumulators.
No, that doesn't make it any easier. I think it makes it harder, because if you're not an accumulator,
right then,
a lot of things have
yeah.
There's a quote that I love though. It's like wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes, something like that. I think there's two parts to it, but can you learn from this example without having to go through the calamity? That's a real opportunity for somebody listening, is to like sit down and really reflect on that.
And I think I'm trying to think how empathy plays into that. An empathetic person can learn the lesson regardless of what goes on, because they can put themselves in the place of that person. Yeah. It's harder for people who are less empathetic, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. To me, one of the changes that can definitely be made is like, okay, I'm going to review my insurance policies, right? Not a crazy thing to say, but probably an action step.
Which is a whole other issue, apparently.
Yeah, that does seem odd. I don't know that I would have thought of that, right? That's a simple prompt. And the same could be said in business.
Because it's easy, like in that situation, it's easy to say, do I really need this? Is it really going to happen?
Yeah. Here's an interesting push for you listening. I also think that one of the challenges with this fire has been watching people say the thing that all of us say, I have said, you have said, we all deal with it, and it fucks everything up. It's not that bad.
Right.
It's not, we don't need to go. Yeah, it's not that bad. And this is the distrust of it, right?
Until the house is surrounded by fire. Right.
And if this is a prompt for you, if maybe you take anything out of this conversation, I want you to take this out of it. If you keep saying it's not that bad, it is not only that bad, but you are essentially deferring the consequence, and it's going to grow every time you do.
Because I think what I heard when that fire first started, it was within a matter of 30 to 60 minutes that it had spread through. It happened that quick because of the wind.
So fast.
Yep.
I was texting a new client of ours, and this is interesting. So one of the exercises we have him do is like, where's your pain? Right? What's the pain? And he was like, I'm not sure what to do. And just kind of got stuck in like very limited outlines of where the pain was. And we look at this business, personal health, and sort of lifestyle. And my comment back was like, there is way more pain than this. Otherwise you wouldn't have found us. Right. So I said, there's more pain than that. I'm reading this now. Think of the little things. I hate dealing with customers. I don't like that I shy away from making bold choices. I hate my fear of checking my bank account. I just pay attention to like all the problems. I don't see what's going great. I weighed this much. I'm worth blank, but I only have this much cash. I feel like shit daily. I'm afraid to bet big on myself. Like those are things that I hear often. And that was my text. I was like, hey, here's what I hear all the time. But my text.
That's essentially the person where the fire has surrounded their house, and now they're trying to figure out how to get out.
Or it's like next door.
Right.
And it's like,
is it time yet?
Dude, it's coming, right? The wind's blowing directly at you. So we exchanged a couple back and forth, and I said, look, you keep telling yourself it's not that bad. I can handle it, rather than saying it's time for change. And that, this is what I said, it keeps you in the loop rather than looking for a solution. And this is a really good prompt for anybody that's going through stuff that's like, it's not that bad. I can get through it. And like that mindset probably fucked a lot of people here in
Yeah.
this situation.
I'm thinking because I saw a story of some guy who's out there with a hose. What do you do with a hose trying to fight a fire? I get it why you would do that. Like what's the final? I mean, and there's like fire everywhere. It's like what's the turning point where you finally? It feels like giving up, but it's not giving up. Like you have to finally surrender to something. It's bigger than yourself. Yeah,
dude. I literally had to do that with my very first business. Like,
but like, what is it where? Yeah, like what is it that finally says I gotta go?
Yeah, it's time.
It's fascinating to watch some of those stories though, with people with a hose. Yeah.
Like,
I'm gonna do everything I can to fight it.
And I honor that, right?
Yeah,
I definitely honor that.
In our own way, we all do that.
Yes, and I think wisdom in situations like this is to really look at your situation, to look at what's been going on, and to stop long enough to say, what is happening that's not going well? And can I just say it's not going well? Because then you open up a whole door for vision, for change, for a new choice. But man, I get so wrapped up in like, I got it. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And I like keep saying, it's fine. It's fine. Like, no, it is not fine, bro. It is not fine. And once you say it's not fine, right? If the fire is 50 miles away and you're like, you know what, this is really bad. And I don't know what could happen, but I'm going to treat this as if it could be really serious. Let's make some new choices.
Especially if it's blowing your way.
Yeah. I mean, 50 miles seems like a long way, but I think this thing has spanned like way more than 50 miles.
Yeah.
So again, if you treat it with a degree of like, it is that bad, let me start making new choices. Then you make a different phone call. You start planning, you start prepping, like better to be prepared and not use what you just thought about than to be the other way, right? It's completely backwards. And again, I can look at my insurance. I can look at some of those things. I can also look at like, what would be my evacuation plan? Where would I go if I have my son? Like, then, how does that work? I can also think about what matters to me here that I would take. Now that's like if the copy paste of the problem existed. I can also think about this in business. What's on fire and what am I ignoring that's an actual problem?
Did you ever see the movie Bruce Almighty?
Yeah. Is that Morgan Freeman and Jim Carrey?
Yes.
Yeah.
When he takes the place of God.
Yeah.
Which we all love to do. I think we could do it. I'm not the biggest Jim Carrey fan, but there's a great scene in that movie where he just can't do it anymore. And he literally puts himself, and I'm sure they did it intentionally, puts himself in the position of surrender. He's like, falls down in the middle of a road, arm stretch. I think he gets hit by a truck eventually. But that image has always stuck with me, that you have to get to that point where you can finally surrender the control, because you can't control it anyway. Yep. Surrender that control and turn it out. Yeah. Turn it back to the universe.
I really wish I had this particular journal. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on.
Oh, he does.
I wrote something the other day doing this newbie session, the neurobioelectrical feedback thing.
That's another episode.
Yeah, we should do an episode on that. So I would love to know your thoughts on this. So this was a sequence that it just came to me after this long session, like in a meditation. So it starts as a need, then we surrender. After surrender, it becomes a want. After it becomes a want, we get our freedom. And after our freedom, we get our finding.
Our what?
Our finding.
Finding. Like it finds us.
Mm-hmm. It was a really interesting trail to run down, and I don't know where it came from. It was just kind of a thought, but
I would have to process on. I do think the need one is the most, whether we like it or not, your needs do need to be taken care of. And when the need is taken care of, a lot of the other things can begin to fall in place.
Yeah.
The need is really where what creates anxiety in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the things that we want start as needs.
Yes.
And I think this has been kind of my saga. Like I'm like, I need this. I have to have it.
Correct.
And when I finally let that go,
And all you listening out there, I can guarantee that's how he is.
totally. But once I let it go from a need, then it kind of exists in like, well, I'm okay without it, but I still want it. Right. Then I get to a place where I'm like, if I can say I want it and it's not a need anymore, I can then say I'm free from it. Or I'm not tied to it the same way. I'm not pulled by it. I'm not influenced by it. It'd be great to have, but I'm free from like the impulse of it.
And the freedom indicates that you're not trying to control the need. You'll try to control it.
Right. And once I'm free from it, there it is. Like almost every time.
Yes.
It's wild.
It's just that if you try to control that process, you won't get there.
I struggle with need to surrender. That to me is the hardest jump.
And I think for most people, I think the rest of it will flow.
Yeah, it goes
It's
fast.
getting over that.
Yeah.
That surrender piece.
Yeah, it goes fast for sure.
It's the Jim Carrey in
Mhm.
front of the truck.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just a very interesting thought to go into.
I think I would say in my language, that's the movement from head to heart at that point.
So head,
Head's always going to try to
need.
control.
surrender, it starts to descend.
Yes.
Yeah. And then freedom would be sort of, I'm in my heart.
Yeah.
And then I attract it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. That's a cool way to relay it.
If it's in your head, forget it. You're still in control phase.
Yeah. Can't control fire.
And you have to be okay with that. It's uncomfortable, but you have to be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think everyone in California has probably gotten to a place where at this point, this thing ain't slowing down. You just got to surrender a little bit and like let it run its course. And that's a scary thing for a lot. And if you take it serious, you get out of the way.
And you can grow tremendously as a person in freedom.
Yeah.
That's not part of like the mainstream of learning how to live your life. It just isn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would like from my previous life, I think that's part of religion's job. Religion has just failed at it.
Mm. Well.
Because it too is about control.
Yeah. Yeah. Surrender is very difficult.
Yes.
Like
you got to stick with it.
Surrender.
You got to stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah. We've sort of made it a large theme, and even on social, man, that word is everywhere. Like just surrender. Like to do that is difficult.
Correct.
Yeah.
I can tell you all I want. You got to surrender. It does not matter until that person is at a place where they could do that.
Yeah.
And I think it happens to you.
You're forced to surrender.
Well, not forced. I think you just finally get enough out of the way. Get out of here.
Don't whisper that. Say it loud.
Get out of here, run away.
No, say it.
I sound like Emerson whispering.
Yeah, why are you whispering into the microphone?
You only have to get a crack out of your own way.
Yeah.
And that it goes through.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like almost like a bathtub. If the drain is down, the drain's down. Once you crack the bathtub, like it starts to drain, and then it usually pushes that thing up.
There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets through.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Sentimentally, I definitely agree with that. The
I had
first domino. It's the first domino.
Correct. I had a spiritual director, a woman in Cincinnati for years. And her and I had this conversation many a times. And she'd always like, I know it's easy for me to say it, but you're going to have to surrender. And I'm like, I know. And I have to just stick with it until something finally happens, until there's that little bit of opening.
Yeah. Well, here's your reminder to get out of your own way, to let your needs be surrendered, maybe. Also to think about vision and what you want so that you can move through your hardship, whatever your hardship is. Because whether you're in California or not, I know there's hardship in your world, and I know there's a message that you need to remind you to think beyond your obstacle. And to us, that word is vision. For you, it might be a different word, but to us, that's the word we use. And
yeah, if that word is unfamiliar, what I was thinking, talking about people in California, what's possible?
Yeah.
What's the possibility? That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Possibility is not connected to today.
Yes.
Right. It exists.
Correct.
Like free.
Yeah.
So,
even if the possibility is a new home, that takes a while before that home is built. And
totally. And it could be temporary. It could be, there's a process through all this, but can you see what's possible? My heart definitely goes out to anyone that's directly dealing with it. And also beyond and above that, I really want California to like come together and think about like, what's the vision here? What are we going to do here that doesn't just band-aid it, but also addresses the larger lack of control that we have and a need for better preparation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're listening and you are not the state of California, this is a good time for you to think about like, where is something on fire that you've been ignoring? Where are you band-aiding the situation? Where are you saying it's not that bad when it is on fire? And where can you begin to make change and learn a lesson from this?
Where is the fire surrounding you? You know, that's not that bad.
Dude, there's a great meme that's been all over the internet. Last thing I'll say here before we wrap, of a dog. You've probably seen this. The whole square is like the house and it's on fire. And the dog's just like, it's not that bad. The whole house is on fire, right? Yeah. Whether that's your business, your relationship, your health, it is time to just own it. Hey, it is that bad. Everything is on fire and I need help.
Fire is the great purificator.
Indeed. I've never heard that. Purifier.
Purifier.
I like purificator. That sounds like a Terminator. All right. Send us a note. What'd you like about today's episode? Send us some comments if you have feedback or thoughts or don't like what we had to say. All of those things are valid. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you being here. Remember to get out of your own way. Admit that you got a problem. Admit that you might be stuck. It might be that bad.
Admit that you are the problem.
You are the problem. I am the problem. How can I change? And we'll see you on the next episode. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for being there.